Alright, hello there again, friends, students, classmates. This is Angel Shares, Ragsak. So, dito naman po tayo ay panibagong pag-uusapan. Pero paalala lang po o sinasabi nga natin, caveats, kung ano man po ang masasabi ko dito, these are just my ideas, my perspectives, my point of views, and it does not reflect the ideas, beliefs, and even the points of views of the organizations I'm connected with. So without further ado, ano ba ang ating pag-uusapan? Sa araw po na ito, ang pag-uusapan po natin ay ang kasaysayan. O ano nga ba ang kasaysayan? Or in English, what is history? Ano nga ba ang kasaysayan? So kailangan natin somehow scrutinize o malalimang pagtalakay sa kung ano ang kasaysayan. Kung tatanungin po natin ang bawat isa o mga estudyante o kung sino man nakakilala natin tungkol sa paksa na ito, usually ang sagot na nakukuha natin pag tinanong po natin yung what is history, it is a study of past events o pwedeng sabihin nila na records of past events. Tama naman po yun. Yun yung sabi nga natin palasak na nakukuha natin na ibig sabihin ng history. Pero, kailangan din natin malaman na pag binigyan natin ng definisyon o kahulugan ang history, marami po actually ang kahulugan yan. Depende rin kung sino ang nagbibigay ng iyong ang kahulugan. Depende kung ano yung inaral niya o field niya. Kaya malamang, if you try to ask a person who's expert in history, then there might be a definition coming from him that's quite different from those people who are not experts in terms of history. Or pwede rin, if you're an economist, a political scientist, you're a feminist, whatever school of thought or ideology you came from. So, I think there's also a different definition of history. Pero, malamang sa malamang, meron silang similarity pa rin. Kahit na sabihin natin na even they have their different expertise, they have this commonality or similarity, and that is about the past. Okay, now, ang history ba ay similar to past? Sa akin kasi, history is not the same as the past. I think I also heard this, or I was also influenced. I just don't know who's this lecturer wherein I've heard his discussion. It's a he na sinasabi na ang mga nakaraang naganap ang totality of the past, it's not actually history. Okay? Ang history, ito yung pag-aaral sa nakaraan. But that doesn't mean na ang istorya ay alam niya lahat ang tungkol sa nangyari nung nakaraan. We have to remember history, the one who's experts, diba? Ang nakikita natin may kredibilidad na magsulat at magsabi kung ano yung mga nangyari nung nakaraan ay mga historian. And we have to remember these historians, they don't have all the facts of history. They don't have everything sources that they have na ito ay nasa kasaysayan o ito ay nung nakaraan na. Okay? So ang naghahanap sila, patuloy silang naghahanap kung ano yung mga pwede nilang gamiting mga sources o batis para sila ay makapagkwento, makabuo ng kwento base sa kanilang mga nakalap na impormasyon, o yung mga impormasyon na to, ito yung mga sinasabi ko na mga batis or sources. Kasi sa history po, napaka-importante po ang batis or sources. Now, aside from the sources, actually it was mentioned by E.H. Carr, a British historian, a journalist, and also diplomat philosopher. Ang sabi niya, pag pinapag-aralan po natin ang kasaysayan or history, we need to understand the historian, or we need to give importance to the historian at the same time his facts. So, walang primacy dito. Meaning to say, hindi mas mataas ang historian sa kanyang mga facts, no? Pantay lang sila. There's no primacy over it. So, if you're trying to study or understand history, you need to recognize these two important variables, the historian and his facts or his sources. Why? Why do you think? Sa aking palagay po, nasabi ni E.H. Carr yan. Kasi, ang historian, siya yung responsable sa pag-iinterpreta. Okay? Siya yung magbibigay ng meaning doon sa mga nakalap niyang mga sources batis, o sinasabi nga niya na his facts, kasi ang sources niya, ang termino niya ay his facts. If you say his facts, it's the historian's facts. Okay? So, yun pa, isa pang napaka-importante, no? Pag sinabing his facts, pwedeng ako isang historian, my facts could be different from the facts of other historians. So, if I have my own facts and the other historian might have his own facts, and let's just say mas marami sa kanya, sa akin mas maunti, and all those facts are considered or recognized by organizations of history, it was reviewed, or these sources were reviewed at recognized nga ng mga organizations, ng mga historian. So, paano ko ngayon ikukwento? At paano niya ngayon ikukwento? O paano yung interpretasyon ko sa interpretasyon niya? Meron pagbabago. Pwedeng merong mabago kasi nga mas limitado yung aking sources o yung facts ko kaysa sa facts niya. And also, pwedeng mas marami yung facts niya kasi nung nalaman ko ito yung facts niya, I did not consider it as a fact. So, para sa akin, pwedeng hindi fact yon, pero sa kanya, kinonsider na niya fact. So, see? So, pag ininterpreta, pag nagkwento na siya, nagkwento na rin ako ng nangyari nung mga nakaraan, pwedeng mabago ang aming istorya kasi nga, iba yung facts niya sa facts ko. Yung nag-select ako, yung facts ko. Yung kinukonsidera ko lang na facts ko, yun lang yung aking ginamit para sa aking pagsusulat ng kasaysayan. Diba? At siya din, sabihin natin, these are the facts that he considered and he actually used it in interpreting or in writing the past event. Diba? So, yun yung sinasabi. Kaya, sabi ni E.H. Carr, his facts. And then, another one that is important, it's actually the historian. Now, what do you think is the importance of historian? As I've said, the historian, no, siya yung nagbibigay ng meaning. Siya yung nagkukonekta lahat ng sources o facts na ginamit niya. So, pagdudugtugin niya, i-reconstruct niya sa mind niya, i-recreate niya sa mind niya, i-reimagine niya sa mind niya, kung ano ba itong mga nakalap niyang sources. Tapos, from all those things, no, na kanyang ginamit, ay magbubuo ngayon siya ng kwento. So, that's the role of historian. Kaya importante din yung historian kasi nga, siya yung bumubuo, kumukonekta sa lahat ng mga sources because sources cannot speak for themselves. No? O kung sabihin natin na merong source man na could speak for himself or herself, no? Let's just say that's just one judgment. That's just one opinion of that person who lived at that time. So, let's just say, ang ginagawa mong kwento, ikaw ay historiador, at ginagawa mo yung kwento ay yung buhay ni Jose Rizal. Diba? Tapos may nakalap kang kwento na batis or source coming from, let's just say, from Josephine Bracken. So that particular document coming from Josephine Bracken could only be one judgment coming from that particular author, who is Josephine Bracken. Diba? It's not the totality of who's Jose Rizal by that time. 'Di ba? So kailangan tignan nila, lalo na kung pinag-uusapan natin his nationalism, his feeling of nationalism to our country. May nasabi si Josephine Bracken. So that's one source. That's one judgment coming from the author Josephine Bracken herself. So ang gagawin ng historiador, mayroon pa, kakalap pa sila ng iba pang mga sources that would corroborate the story of Josephine Bracken. So, kung meron pang may mga sources na it would corroborate, no, the story of or the line of Josephine Bracken about Jose Rizal's, let's just say, feeling of nationalism, then, di ba, it would validate or verify that Jose Rizal, when it comes to his feeling of nationalism, no, ganun talaga. So, tama yung pwedeng sinasabi ni Josephine Bracken kasi nakakuha pa ng mga historiador ng iba pang pruweba. Yung pruweba na sinasabi ko, ito yung batis o yung sinasabi ni E.H. Carr, ang termino niya ay his facts. So, yun. Kasi ang historiador, hindi siya pwedeng magsulat nang wala siyang ginagamit na batis o wala siyang ginagamit na ebidensya. At yung ebidensya na yon, ito yung tinatawag natin na sources or batis. But in the line or in the term of Mr. E.H. Carr, an English historian, diplomat, journalist, and is also considered philosopher, no? Ito yung his facts. And I told you, his facts kasi, historians might be using this kind of facts, but other historians might not be using or considering that fact as considered as fact. So, what's the consequence of that? The consequence might be they have different stories of what had happened in the past. Kaya nga may line na there is only one past but many histories. Okay? Doon yun yung isa sa rason kung bakit may mga historiador na hanggang ngayon o kahit dati, pagdating sa kanilang interpretasyon o kwento ng kasaysayan ay magkaiba. Magkaiba kasi depende sa mga sources na ginagamit nila, ganun din sa paraan ng kanilang pag-iinterpreta. The process of how they interpret those sources that they have with them. Okay? So, yun po. Another definition of history aside from actually, did we define already what history? Oh, I think yes, because I said commonly people, if they would be asked by this question, what is history, usually we answer them with, this is actually the story of the past or the records of the past. But then again, we have to understand that there are many definitions of history. And kung babalikan natin kung ano talaga yung derivation or history is kung saan talaga nagmula yung salitang historia or history, it's actually it came from Greek, because at that time it was already coined the term historia, and historia history is derived from the Greek term historia. Okay, but definitely if they would have to use the character of the Greek character at that time, syempre hindi yung parang alphabet natin na historia, it's HISTORIA. No, actually they have their own characters. Pero ang sinasabi dito, history is derived from the Greek term historia, which means at that time, ang ibig sabihin nito is to inquire, or it's an inquiry, or it's actually a learning. So doon pa lang ang sinasabi dito, if you're trying to study or understand history, you really need to inquire. Okay? Pag nag-inquire ka, syempre may ebidensya ka. Di ba? Kailangan mo ng ebidensya para pag ikaw ay nagsulat, inintindi mo, no, ang nangyari nung nakaraan, objective ka kasi nga you have your evidences with you. That's why you have to inquire. Now, I think another definition of history na medyo palasak or common. It's actually the past of mankind. I'm not saying na if it's palasak, it's strong already. No. Tama naman po ito. Pero kailangan kasi natin, shall I say, we have to upgrade or we have to, hindi na siguro upgrade, we also have to be open-minded with other definitions of history para mas maintindihan natin kung ano ang kasaysayan. So again, going back, another definition that we could put also to history, it's actually the past of mankind. And this one is also common among us or among people if they would have to define what history is. Okay? Now, aside from the past of mankind, if we would have to take a look at references, especially dictionary po, kung sa Webster, I think one thing that you could read from dictionaries, one of which is Webster. It's, if you say history, this is actually a chronological record of significant events, or yun nga, yung sinasabi nga natin, isa pang palasak, the study of past events. But then again, I told you that, history is not the same as the past because, the historians, even the historians themselves, do not know the total pasts. So, sila ay nagbabase lamang dun sa mga nakuha nilang mga ebidensya. So, base dun sa mga nakuha nilang mga ebidensya o yung mga na-unearth nila o quote-unquote discover nila o nakuha nilang mga ebidensya, dun lang sila magre-reconstruct, magre-reimagine, magre-recreate ng kanilang kwento ng nakaraan. At sinabi nga natin, history, it's a chronological record of the past. So, pag sinabi nating history, kadalasan nakikita natin, lalo na sa mga textbook, yung kung saan nagsimula from the beginning and then contemporary. So, usually, di ba, makikita natin pag pinapag-aralan natin yung kasaysayan, saan ba tayo nagmula. So, from there, saan na tayo ngayon? So, 'di ba, pag meron pa tayong mga textbook, merong mga periods pa. Like the pre-Spanish period, what is the Philippines before the coming of the Europeans or before the coming of the conquistadores or the colonizers, and then the Spanish era, meaning when we were being colonized by Spain, and then American period, and then the Japanese period, and then the contemporary period. Usually ganun yung divide baga, or tama ba yung term ko, pagkaka-divide ng mga era or period sa ating kadalasan mga textbook. Because when I was in elementary, high school, and even college, ganun, na usually sa akin lang experience hindi namin natatapos yung lahat. Kadalasan hanggang Japanese ata, or may precedents pero hindi sa lahat. So, ganun naman yung experience ko. But that doesn't mean na we will just be, if you're really a student, definitely hindi ka lang magre-rely sa sinasabi ng teacher mo. If you really want to understand, learn, you have to study the book that was given to you. And, not just the book, you have to think outside the box as much as possible. You also have to read other books, no? And also, if you have friends with you who are actually great in history or history buff and everything, so you might also be listening to them. And lalo na ngayon, 'di ba? Kung may mga podcasts at mga YouTube na you think that is credible, speaking about the topic about history, why not? Or also, you have to join or participate on seminars who are graced by, let's just say, credible people or credible authority who are great in the study or the discipline of history, diba? So, ganun. Anyways, going back, well, I could also give you a definition of history in the context of the Filipinos. So, I think the one who championed the I would have to say one historian, one Filipino historian that actually championed a definition of history or kasaysayan, it's Dr. Salazar, and I think he's great in his discipline. He's well respected among historians, not just historians, but also people who actually love love history. Okay, so according to him, according to Dr. Salazar, kasaysayan. Pag sinabi daw kasaysayan, ito ay ang salitang ugat ng kasaysayan ay saysay. Pag sinabing saysay, sa atin, sa mga Tagalog, sa mga Filipino, lalo na sa mga Tagalog, no, may dalawang ibig sabihin yan. Saysay, pwedeng you're stating something or you're narrating something. So, nagsasalaysay ka. May kinukwento ka, kumbaga. And then another one, it's saysay. May saysay, kumbaga, ang sinasabi ko. So, saysay is relevance or importance. So, saysay, it's stating, narrating, making kwento, parang ganun. And then, saysay, may relevance or importance. Kaya nga, pag ito din, kung may saysay man yung sinasabi mo, sino nga ba ang nagde-determine kung may saysay o hindi? So, syempre, those people na sinasalaysayan mo. So, if these people would have to say that what you are saying to them, it's may saysay or may relevance or may importance sa kanya, then that would be great. So, kumbaga, if you say kasaysayan, according to Dr. Salazar, ito yung salaysay na may saysay para sa sinasalaysayang mga grupo ng tao. So, kung magsusulat ka man ng anything about history, make sure that you are narrating a past event that is relevant among those people, among those people, no? Among those people. Those people na, sabi nga natin, they would be the one who would be determining that what you are telling them, narrating to them, it's actually relevant, important, or not. So, syempre, pag magsusulat ka, magsusulat ka ba ng isang bagay na hindi relevant para sa kanila or hindi importante sa kanila. So, according to Dr. Salazar, make sure that it is relevant to the people, those things that you are writing. Okay? Well, other definitions of history. I think I mentioned to you already that history, it's actually reconstruction. I think this one is coming from the book of Louis Gottschalk. This is an American historian, from his book Understanding History. No, history as a reconstruction, or history means reconstruction. I said that from this is actually my understanding of the book of Louis Gottschalk. Because you cannot construct all the things that had happened in the past. As I've said again, history, it's not the same as the past. So, what the historians would have to write about history, this is just based on the sources that they have with them. So, let's just say we talked about pre-Spanish era. So, lahat ba nung nangyari nung pre-Spanish era before the coming of the Spaniards, alam lahat ng historians? Of course not. So, yung mga kwento nila na meron sila binahagi sa atin, ito ay nanggaling lang sa mga batis or sources na nakalap nila noon. Di ba? Kaya nga, the tendency is, the more na marami silang mas makalap na sources noong panahon ng pre-Spanish era, the consequence would be, pwedeng mapalitan, ma-revise, ma-reconstruct yung alam natin tungkol sa kasaysayan. Kasi history is not absolute. Okay? For me, history is not absolute. Kasi pwede yan mapalitan. Pwede yan ma-revise. Pwede yan ma-reconstruct. Depending on those sources that you have, and depending on the historian who's actually interpreting their facts. Diba? So, yun. So, history as a reconstruction. That's why it is a reconstruction, and it's not construction. Reconstruction in the minds of those historians. They're the one in charge of reconstructing it. They're the ones who's in charge of recreating it from those sources that they have. in mind, or from those sources that they obtain. Okay. And we have to remember that historians really rely on surviving records or those historical facts, as E.H. Carr has mentioned, or yung sinasabi nga natin na sources. Okay. Now, I would have to share also other definitions of E.H. Carr with regard to history. So, according to him, the inquiry conducted by the historian and the series of past events into which he inquires. The inquiry conducted by the historian and the series of past events into which he inquires. So, as I've said a while back, if we say inquiry from the derivation of the term history derived from the Greek term historia, which means to inquire. So, malamang sa malamang, katulad din ni E.H. Carr, katulad din ng karamihan ng mga historian, mga profesor nagtuturo ng history, if you would like to inquire, again if you would like to study or really understand history, we really need to inquire. We just don't memorize. This is misconception about history. History is not memorization. History should be about understanding. History is not about whatever the historians would have to say to you. Would you be 100%, let's just say, swallow it? Diba? Knowing the fact that even the historians have their own different stories about the things that had happened in the past. Now, if you have this skepticism, or somehow you're skeptic or doubtful of what the historian is actually trying you to believe, diba? And you're skeptic or somehow doubtful about what he or she is actually telling you, well, you need to inquire. Yun ang gusto ni E.H. Carr at yun ang gusto ng mga Griego ng mga panahon na yun, or the Greeks, pagdating sa pag-aaral ng history. So, sabi nga ni E.H. Carr, you as the historian should inquire. And I think it's not just the historian would have to inquire. So, kahit ngayon, estudyante, classmate, normal, citizens of the Philippines and citizens of all of the world, if you are skeptic or doubtful of something, we need to inquire. But make sure that the sources that we would be using are deemed to be credible. Okay? And not heavily biased also. Then, according also to H. Carr, it's a continuous process of interaction between the historian and his facts, an ending dialogue between the present and the past. So, yung sinasabi nga natin na two important variables of studying or understanding history, you take note of the role of the historian, because without the historian, and there's this facts, without the historian, kahit na may facts, or sources, they cannot speak for themselves. Okay, the one who's actually giving meaning to the sources, no, it's actually the historian. Now, kung ang historian naman walang facts, wala siyang ginagamit na sources, that's pointless. Parang gumagawa ka lang ng fictional stories, 'di ba? So, it shouldn't be like that. So, historian must have his facts, must have his sources to interpret or to write the story of what had happened in the past. Okay? Kasi meron ngang I think, there's a line coming from E.H. Carr. Let me just read it to you. The historian without his facts is ruthless and futile. Some may pronounce it as futile. So the historian without his facts is ruthless and futile or futile. The facts without their historian are dead and meaningless. So yun. So ang nagsabi nun ay E.H. Carr. So I agree with the historian E.H. Carr with regard to the importance of the historian, and at the same time his facts or the sources. And sabi rin niya, this is an ending dialogue. History is also then an ending dialogue between the present and the past. Because according to H. Carr, and also other historians would have to agree with it, yung nalalaman natin na history, it's actually written in the present. I don't know if you would have to agree with that. So, history is written in the present. So, malamang, kung sa present mo sinulat, yung pagtanaw mo sa nakaraan, it's actually through the lens of the present. Okay? Kaya, hindi rin maiwasan na yung mga historians before and the historians today have different interpretations with regard to a certain event that had happened in the past. Because how they look at the time to a certain past event, it's different from those who are living today who are actually a new generation of historians. So, yun. Kaya ang sabi ni H. Carr, an ending dialogue between the present and the past. I think to illustrate more of that kind of line, ano yun let's just say nangyari yung French Revolution. Wag na lang, sa Philippine context na lang. Let's just say nangyari yung 1896 Revolution. Okay? Nung panahon yung kay Andres Bonifacio. And the starting point of there, it's the cry of revolution when they try to punitize, when they try to tear their own cedula. And tearing of their cedula, it's actually a sign of, you are disagreeing already with the Spaniards. It's something big already if Spaniards would have to know that you tore your cedula. Okay? So, kasi pag cedula, parang ano yan kung meron kang cedula, you're accepting that you are under the kingdom of Spain, or you're under Spain. When you tore it, when you did tear it, then definitely it's something big or huge already from that you are going against the Spaniards. So let's just say yon. Kung ikaw ay nagtanong, or if you're let's just say if you're a historian and you live 10 years after that 1896 revolution. If you would have to write the 1896 revolution, ano kaya yung kwento na mapapalabas mo doon? Okay? And compare it to, let's just say, 2022. And you're a historian. And you have your sources with you. Not as, let's just say, not as many as what that historian in let's just say in 1906, kasi 1896 nangyari, di ba sabi ko 10 years after, merong historian nagsulat noong 1906 about that 1896 revolution. Sabihin natin mas marami ka ngayon sources kaysa yung sources noon. Kaso nga lang mas fresh noon yung historian kasi 10 years lang. Ito, 'di ba? Isang century na. 'Di ba ang nakaraan? Tama, century, 100 more years nang nakaraan. So, 'yun. So, ano sa tingin mo yung masasabi mo o makukwento mo tungkol doon? 'Di ba? See the difference? Kaya yung sinasabi natin, and sinasabi rin ng mga historians, and one of which is C.H. Carr, that in writing history, or if you're reading history, you are actually reading the past through the use of the present, looking at the lens of the present. Kasi pwedeng may pwedeng may epekto yan sa historiador ngayon, yung nangyayari ngayon sa isang historiador na nagsusulat tungkol noong nakaraang panahon. So, hindi maiwasan that you might be influenced with the climate. If I say climate, quote-unquote climate, could be social climate, political climate, economic climate, whatever. So, there might be this influence to how would you write, the process of writing history. More so that the historians that we know now have the variety of or have different methods on how they write the story of the past. Diba? So, yun. Now, another one, it's history means interpretation. It is an interpretation. Interpretation ng isang historiador. Problema lang dito, make sure that the historian that you're actually following, subscribing, or you would like to believe in or agree with, these are credible. I'm not saying that they're not credible at all, but there might be case that among the historians that we have, and there's this topic na similar at meron naman silang sinasabi, make sure that from all those historians that you have, take a look also at uh, their biases, because each one of us has its own bias. We have our own biases. Even the historians have their own biases. Now, let's just say merong topic anong nakaraan, and you know that historian is actually a friend, a relative of that particular personality that is actually on that particular event that you are studying or that you are trying to scrutinize if that is true or not. Di ba? So, kung heavily biased sa tingin nyo because magkaibigan o relative at close sila, then we might say, ang palabas niya or projection niya doon or projection, ang pagkakadescribe nun ay puro positive. So, somehow, alam mo na kung bakit hindi mo siya paniwalaan. O kaya, kung hindi man yun, you just have to take a look at the process na paano niya sinulat yun at ano yung mga sources na ginamit niya, bakit siya nakabuo ng ganung interpretasyon. So, if you think that historian has this flow in terms of the method that he used on processing or writing his the story of the past, or let's just say, in terms of the sources that he or she also used, nakukulangan ka, then why not? Pwedeng itry mo din yung ibang historian na meron din silang kwento tungkol sa isang event na gusto mong pag-aralan. Diba? And I think in the case of whoever, if it's Saide or it's Agoncillo, kasi ito yung usually nakalakhan natin, mga nagsulat ng mga textbook natin nung primary education natin, or basic education natin. Kahit nga nung tertiary education, diba, ginagamit pa rin natin yung mga libro nila. Hindi ko sinasabi na huli they are. They are, how would you call this one? Heavily biased, no? There could be a certain topic lang. Okay? Kaya nga sinasabi ko na if this particular event that had happened in the past, that is actually the thing that you are studying, then you have to be open also or flexible to the other accounts or to the other stories of other historians. And from those, you weigh if sino dito sa mga historians ang mas credible ang sinasabi tungkol sa particular event na to. You have to be objective, quote-unquote objective or fair in trying to compare and contrast, no? As much as possible, huwag mo gagamitin ang emotion mo. It should be about reason over emotion, as they say. Yun po ha. So, history, it means interpretation. Parang ano rin lang yun eh. Kunwari, may sinabi ako, may sinabi rin ng iba, tas ang topic namin ay isang tawag dito, iisa lang ang topic namin. Kunwari, yung professor nyo or teacher nyo sa ibang subject, he or she is actually telling you about the story of what had happened in the past. Diba? And then, I'm also telling a story of what had happened in the past. Well, it's really up to you if who's actually telling the truth, or hindi lang telling the truth, more credible of telling you something about that particular event that happened in the past. Is that, let's just say, a math teacher, a science teacher, an English teacher who's not actually major of that, or someone who's actually majoring in history or Philippine studies. Ganun. Although I'm not saying naman if you're a major of this Philippine studies or history, you're better than the other fields naman. Kasi kahit naman may other fields, they're history buff. So, pwede rin na mas magaling sila kaysa sa talagang nag-major sa history. Lalo na kung nag-major ka naman history, hindi mo naman in-apply or hindi ka naman nagpatuloy talaga yung line of work mo, hindi ganun din. So, mas malamang baka pwede mong mas paniwalaan yon, lalo't higit kung magpa-provide siya ng mga sources niya. Bakit niya nasasabi yun? Diba? Okay, so ganun. So, history means interpretation. Whose interpretation is that? Of course, it's the historians. Now, if you have your teachers with you, and you have your book or module that you're actually following, and then he or she would have to tell you something, well, that is also his or her interpretation. But mainly based from, or they're influenced by the historians whom they are influenced with. Okay? So, yun, kunwari, ako, di ba? Sinasabi ko that I am influenced by EHCAR and even of what I've read to Louis Gottschalk. So, it's not my original idea or lines. These are actually, these statements of mine, I'm just influenced by the historians also, and I'm just telling it to you. I'm just sharing it to you. Okay? So, yun po, pwedeng madagdagan, pwedeng mabawasan, but I think the key points here, nasasabi ko naman, and I am not actually, owning it. So, these are ideas coming from the historians. Alright? And then, sabi rin ni H. Carr, sinasabi nga, history means historian. History is what the historian makes. So, kung ano yung pagkakaalam natin sa history, yun ay dahil sa mga historian. Ang danger lang nito, if that historian nagpapa-impluwensya sa politiko, kasi they have this motive or purpose to distort, di ba? Kung ano yung nangyari nung nakaraan, then, well, we have to be very vigilant about that particular historian. A historian ideally should be fair, should be objective, quote-unquote objective. Though we know that historians, they also have their subjectivity. Kaya nga sinasabi ng iba that history should be objective. But how could history be objective if there is subjectivity among the historians? Kaya as much as possible, we have to recognize that there is subjectivity. Yung sinasabi nga natin na by biases. But we have to remember, sabi nga natin sa history is to understand, if you think that you're skeptic or doubtful about a certain person, even if that is historian, kung tunay ka talagang nag-aaral at umiintindi ng mga bagay-bagay and you actually search for the truth, then you need to understand, you need to study, you need to do something for you to satisfy your craving, your intellectual craving, kumbaga, or cravings. So, there. So, meron pa ba? Pwede rin history, according to Collingwood, mabasa ko lang, history is the reenactment in the historian's minds of the thought whose history is studying. So, yung sabi, parang yun, reconstruction, reimagination. And according to Parsons, na may sinulat siya about selective. History is a selective system, not only of cognitive, but of causal orientations to reality. Now, selective system because the one who's selecting it's actually the historians, and from those selected sources or facts that he or she would have to obtain in using his writing of history. Ulitin natin ha, so kung ito lang yung napili niya na kanyang facts, yun lang yung pwede niyang isulat. Yun lang yung pwede niyang maging basehan para isulat niya ang isang kwento. Kaya, kung ikaw ay malisyosong historian at connected ka nga sa kung ano man, may motive ka na i-distort o linlangin ang mga tao, you have that kind of motive, malamang baka ang gusto mo lang kunin ng mga sources yung magpapatibay, magpapatotoo na ang yung sinasabi, yung nasa mind mo, ay yun ang nangyari talaga. Kaya hindi mo gagamitin. You will not be using those sources that it would deviate from your line of thinking or from your interpretation. So you would only be using those sources that would align to your thinking. Diba? Kaya yun ang danger din. That's why we have to be very vigilant, also watchful, and somehow we have to be skeptic. Not 100% na we would have to swallow everything that we hear and that we read. So, ganun din kung ano yung sinasabi ko. Huwag kayong 100% na maniwala. Pwede rin yung maging skeptic, maging doubtful. So, well, study and try to, baka you have different line of thinking or the way how you understand history also, no? Pwede naman I'm open to it naman. It's okay to agree to disagree. No, I'm also learning. I don't think I would be very close, or I would be close to criticisms also, because I'm not perfect, or even if I am perfect or close to perfect or whatever, I would still be open to whatever people would be telling. Kasi from there, you also learn something. Kasi yun na naman ang importante. Di ba? We have to learn also. Sabi ko nga, it's cool to be learned. Di ba? Well, other definitions also, history, according to Keith Jenkins, are framed by people with power. So, yun nga lang tanong natin, anong klaseng power ang sinasabi, kaya niya economic power, democratic power, ano ba to, power, people power, kilikili power, Powerpuff Girl, charot na. which kind of power, diba? Pero kung tutusin, pwedeng oo, kung sino ang nailuklok, pinuno, syempre, at pag may pinuno ka, may kapangyarihan ka, at magsusulat ka ng isang kasaysayan, paano kung sinabi nila na these are the things that you need to do, to write? Ay, wala na, dali na, distorted na ang history, no? Pero kung tinignan mo naman, pwedeng i-reconstruct yun, but it is based on your sources, and those sources are recognized, and this is not just about group of people who's telling you ito talaga yung nangyari, diba? At yung mga tao na yun, these are the elite or educated people, but how about the feelings and the experiences of the masa? Ano yung tingin nila nung time na yun? Whatever, let's just say, whatever panahon is that, So, anong mas palalabasin mo? Yung sinasabi ng mga network of elite people or educated people, or those network of poor people, or yung tinatawag natin na masa? Diba? Ikaw na historiador, anong mas palalabasin mo? At paano mo isusulat yon? Sa isang, let's just say, pinuno na may kapangyarihan, at yung pinuno na yun ay sabihin natin ay meron siyang kinikilingan. So, paano mo ngayon isusulat ang kasaysayan na hindi mo ma-offend yung mga leaders na to? Hindi mo rin ma-offend, sabihin natin, yung nag-commission sa'yo na mayaman. At hindi mo rin ma-offend ang taong bayan. So, how would you write history at that time? Nung time na sinusulat mo. Marami pang ibig sabihin ng history, which is tend to mean on the negative. Ito yung sinasabi rin na Napoleon Bonaparte na actually Napoleon Bonaparte asked this question. Sabi niya, what is history but fable agreed upon. So parang sinasabi na ang kasaysayan ay isang fable o kwento na pinag-uusapan or agreed upon. Robert anong pangalan ba niya? I forgot. Robert Walpole, I think. Nagsabi rin siya na this is a statesman who said that history is pack of lies. And I think UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill, if you still remember Winston Churchill, World War II, sabi niya, history is written by the victors. So, kung panalo ka, sa kung ano man pinaglalaban mo sa inyong lipunan, at kayo yung naupo, may kapangyarihan, how would you write history? Yeah. So, there. So, yun po ang history. So, malalimang pagtalakay sa history. Maraming salamat po sa pakikinig, at ulit-ulitin po natin ang mga ganitong mga usapan ay para mas maging, sabi natin, mas may pagkatuto tayo at pagkaalam, because you would like to be empowered. Stay empowered. Stay enlightened. And it's cool to be learned. Because as always, I, Angel, shares, ragsak. Yan. Bye. Parang nalimutan ko to. Yan, sa Taal. So, bye again guys. See you!